The fluorescent lights hummed, a dull, insistent drone that mirrored the tension coiling in Suning's stomach. Her superior, Ms. Zhao, a woman whose smile never quite reached her eyes, tapped a slender finger against the open diary on her desk. The cheap paper felt brittle, almost as fragile as Suning's composure. Each tap resonated like a hammer blow against her carefully constructed facade. 3 years. 3 years she had kept these feelings locked away, hidden beneath the professional mask she wore each day. Now, splayed open like a dissected frog in a biology lab, her innermost thoughts were laid bare, exposed to the cold scrutiny of Ms. Zhao's gaze. Suning swallowed, the dryness in her throat making it a difficult task. She could feel the blood draining from her face, leaving her skin clammy and cold. Had she been careless? Had she left it on her desk, a blatant invitation for prying eyes? The thought was ludicrous. She was meticulous, almost obsessive, about keeping her private life private. This felt deliberate. A setup. Suning, Ms. Zhao's voice was smooth, deceptively calm, yet it carried a sharp edge that sliced through the silence. Your diary is all written about Mr. Liu. Each word was enunciated with precision, laced with a mixture of disapproval and something else. Was it amusement? Suning's mind raced, trying to grasp the implications. This wasn't just about unprofessional conduct, it was a power play. Ms. Zhao had always resented her quick wit, her efficiency, the subtle respect she commanded from their colleagues. This was an opportunity, a chance to finally bring her down. In 10 minutes, Ms. Zhao continued, her eyes fixed on Suning's, I want to see your resignation letter. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Resignation. For expressing her feelings. The injustice of it burned in her chest, a fiery ball of resentment and indignation. Her hands clenched into fists, the nails digging into her palms, a small, sharp pain that grounded her in the present. She wanted to argue, to fight back, to defend her right to privacy, to her feelings. But what good would it do? The diary was there, the evidence undeniable. Arguing would only prolong the inevitable, and she had no desire to grovel. She met Ms. Zhao's gaze, her own eyes flickering with a defiance she didn't quite feel. Fine, she managed, her voice barely a whisper, though inside, a storm raged. Fine. Let them have their petty victory. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. The walk back to her desk felt like an eternity. Each step was heavy, leaden. The whispers and curious glances of her colleagues were like needles pricking her skin. She could feel their eyes on her, dissecting her, judging her. The shame was a physical sensation, a cold wave washing over her. 3 years. 3 years of building a career, of proving herself, and it all came crashing down because of a few scribbled words in a cheap diary. She reached her desk, the familiar clutter suddenly alien, a reminder of a life that was no longer hers. Her hands trembled as she opened her laptop, the blank document mocking her. Resignation letter. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. She stared at the screen, the cursor blinking impatiently, a silent demand for action. What could she write? What could she possibly say that would capture the absurdity of the situation, the injustice, the sheer pettiness of it all? The words wouldn't come. Her mind was a jumbled mess of emotions, anger, resentment, humiliation, and a strange, unsettling sense of relief. Relief? Why relief? She probed the feeling, trying to understand its source. Perhaps it was the realization that she no longer had to pretend. She no longer had to hide her feelings, to bury them deep within the pages of a diary. The truth was out, however painful, however humiliating. And in a strange, twisted way, it was liberating. She began to type, the words flowing now, not the carefully crafted, professional prose she was accustomed to, but raw, honest words that poured from her heart. She didn't bother with formalities, with polite platitudes. She wrote about the stifling atmosphere, the constant pressure to conform, the hypocrisy of a company that preached innovation while crushing individuality. She wrote about Ms. Zhao, her thinly veiled contempt, her petty power plays. And she wrote about Lu Qishu. She wrote about the way he carried himself, the quiet authority he exuded, the rare, fleeting smiles that could light up a room. She wrote about the way her heart ached with a longing she couldn't explain, a yearning for something she knew she could never have. When she was finished, she printed the letter, the crisp white paper feeling heavy in her hand. She walked back to Ms. Zhao's office, her steps lighter now, the weight of secrecy lifted. She placed the letter on the desk, their eyes meeting for a brief, charged moment. Ms. Zhao's expression was unreadable, a mask of polite indifference. Suning didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked away, leaving the diary on the desk, a final, defiant act of rebellion. As she walked out of the office, she felt a strange sense of calm descend upon her. It was over. This chapter of her life was closed. And as she stepped out into the bright sunlight, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of anticipation for what lay ahead. The unknown was daunting, yes, but it was also filled with possibilities. She had nothing left to lose. And in that nothingness, she found a strange, unexpected freedom. The biting Shanghai wind whipped at Suning's hair, each gust a cold slap against her face. The city noise, usually a vibrant hum, now grated on her nerves, a discordant symphony of car horns and chattering pedestrians. Her legs moved mechanically, carrying her away from the opulent restaurant, away from the stunned faces of the Song family, away from him. The pavement seemed to stretch endlessly, the gray concrete mirroring the bleakness in her heart. It's over. The thought echoed in her mind, hollow and heavy. I slept with my boss right after I was fired. I shouldn't have drunk yesterday. Each step was a physical manifestation of regret, pounding the realization deeper into her soul. Yesterday's bravado, the defiant confession, the desperate hope for a reconciliation, all of it now felt childish, naive. Had she truly believed he would take her back, not out of love, but pity? The humiliation burned, hotter than the expensive liquor she'd consumed last night, scorching a path through her already fractured pride. 3 years. 3 years she had carried the weight of her unspoken love, watching him from afar, building him up in her mind as the perfect, unattainable ideal. 3 years of silent yearning, culminating in a reckless confession fueled by liquid courage and a desperate, foolish hope. And what had she gotten in return? A dismissal, swift and clean, like severing a dead branch. The memory of his cool, indifferent gaze, the subtle tightening of his jaw as she poured out her heart, replayed in her mind. Had he even registered her words, or were they simply the ramblings of a dismissed employee, easily forgotten? The hazy memories of last night began to surface, fragmented and disorienting. The opulent bar, the burn of the alcohol, the blurred lines of his face. She remembered the way his hand had felt on her arm, surprisingly gentle, guiding her through the crowded streets. The sudden silence of a hotel room, the muted city lights filtering through the curtains. Shame washed over her in waves. How could she have been so reckless? So vulnerable? She had handed him the power to break her, and he had, without a second thought, without a flicker of remorse. The image of his impassive face as he signed the marriage certificate flashed before her eyes. A cruel joke. A twisted mockery of her deepest desires. He hadn't married her out of love, she knew that now. It was a transaction, a way to silence her, to control the narrative. A bitter laugh escaped her lips, startling a nearby couple. They glanced at her with a mixture of pity and disdain, their expressions mirroring her own self-loathing. She wrapped her arms around herself, a futile attempt to ward off the chill that seemed to have seeped into her bones. The city lights blurred, distorted by the unshed tears that prickled at the corners of her eyes. She hadn't cried then, in his presence, not even when he delivered the news of her termination with the same detached composure he displayed in board meetings. She had held herself together, maintaining a semblance of dignity, even as her world crumbled around her. But now, alone on the unforgiving streets of Shanghai, the carefully constructed walls began to crumble. Suning stumbled, her heel catching on a loose paving stone. She steadied herself against a lamppost, the cold metal a stark contrast to the burning shame that coursed through her veins. What now? The question hung in the air, unanswered, unanswerable. Her career was in ruins, her reputation tarnished, her heart shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The Song family, with their insatiable greed and their manipulative tactics, would undoubtedly seize upon this latest humiliation, using it to further their own ambitions. The thought of facing them, of enduring their thinly veiled contempt and their sanctimonious pronouncements, filled her with a sense of dread so profound it made her stomach churn. She had always been the strong one, the independent one, the one who refused to bow to their expectations. But now, stripped bare of her pride and her self-worth, she felt like a puppet, her strings tangled and frayed, her movements controlled by forces beyond her grasp. The distant wail of a siren pierced the night, a mournful cry that resonated with the turmoil within her. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the noise, the lights, the suffocating weight of her despair. She needed to think, to plan, to find a way to salvage what little remained of her life. But the thoughts swirled chaotically, colliding and merging into a vortex of confusion and fear. How could she possibly navigate this treacherous landscape, with its hidden agendas and its complex power dynamics? She was alone, adrift in a sea of uncertainty, with no anchor, no compass, no hope. The memory of Kong Su's face flickered in her mind, a fleeting image of calm amidst the storm. His words, spoken with a quiet intensity, echoed in her ears. He had offered her a lifeline, a chance to escape the suffocating grip of the Song family and forge her own path. At the time, she had dismissed his offer as a mere courtesy, a gesture of professional respect. But now, in the desolate aftermath of her self-destruction, his words held a new significance, a glimmer of possibility in the encroaching darkness. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way out of this labyrinth of despair. Perhaps there was a chance to reclaim her life, to rebuild her shattered self, to find a semblance of peace amidst the ruins. But the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, a treacherous journey through a minefield of secrets and lies. And as she stood there, alone in the cold embrace of the Shanghai night, Suning knew that she had a choice to make. She could succumb to the weight of her despair, allowing herself to be consumed by the darkness. Or she could fight, claw her way back from the abyss, and emerge, scarred but unbroken, ready to face whatever the future held. The cool air of the hotel lobby offered little respite from the simmering heat of the afternoon's events. Suning stood before the concierge desk, her fingers tracing the cool marble surface as she finalized the car booking. Her reflection stared back, a woman composed, almost serene, but the tremor in her hand betrayed the turmoil beneath. Just hours ago, she had stood before a judge, a marriage certificate clutched in her hand, officially Mrs. Lu Chishu. A secret marriage, a stolen moment of defiance. Now, the weight of that defiance pressed upon her, a heavy cloak of anticipation and dread. He promised he would handle it, she thought, her gaze drifting towards the entrance. But how much can he truly control? The scent of lilies, overpowering and cloying, announced his arrival before his voice did. Suning. Her father's voice, laced with venom, sliced through the polite murmur of the lobby. He strode towards her, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Suning's stomach clenched. She hadn't spoken to him since her abrupt dismissal from Lu Chishu's company 3 years ago, a dismissal orchestrated by her own family, eager to sever ties and pursue more advantageous connections. The irony wasn't lost on her. They had pushed her away, discarded her like a broken toy, and now, here they were, their faces contorted with a mixture of shock and rage. They want something, she realized, a bitter taste rising in her throat. They always do. What do you think you're doing? He hissed, stopping inches from her. His eyes, usually calculating and cold, now burned with a strange, desperate fire. The lilies he carried trembled in his grasp, their pristine white a stark contrast to the darkness in his gaze. Suning held her ground, her chin tilted upwards, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. "I'm leaving," she stated, her voice surprisingly steady. Inside, however, a storm raged. Fear warred with a strange sense of liberation. She had spent years trying to please them, to mold herself into the daughter they wanted. Now, finally, she was free. He laughed, a harsh, grating sound that drew the attention of several nearby guests. "Leaving? You think you can just walk away after this disgrace?" Suning felt a prickle of unease. The lobby, which moments before had been a sanctuary of anonymity, suddenly felt like a stage, every eye upon her. "He wants to humiliate me," she realized, her hand tightening around the strap of her purse. "He wants to break me." Disgrace? She echoed the word, letting the question hang in the air. Is it a disgrace to marry the man I love? The question, though spoken softly, resonated in the vastness of the lobby. Her father's face darkened, a vein throbbing in his temple. The scent of lilies became suffocating. "Love?" he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "You dare speak of love? You're nothing but a pawn, a tool to be used. And now, you've ruined everything." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Be my slave." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Suning stared at him, a mixture of disbelief and disgust swirling within her. Slave. The word echoed in her mind, a grotesque distortion of the life she had envisioned. "He thinks he can still control me." "I'm not your slave," she stated, her voice trembling slightly despite her effort to maintain composure. "I never was." He smiled, a cruel, triumphant smile. "Oh, but you are. You always have been. And now, I want you to kneel down and atone your sins." The words were punctuated by a sharp intake of breath from a nearby onlooker. The air thickened with tension. Suning's heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He continued, his voice laced with a chilling calmness. "The security guards are on their way. They'll escort you out of here, and then we'll see what Luciu has to say about his disobedient little wife." Suning felt a wave of nausea wash over her. He was bluffing, she told herself. He wouldn't dare, but the look in his eyes, the cold, calculating glint, told a different story. She glanced towards the entrance, her breath catching in her throat. 2 uniformed security guards were approaching, their expressions impassive. He actually called them. A sense of despair washed over her, a cold, creeping dread. Was this how it would end? Humiliated, dragged away, her marriage exposed before Luciu even had a chance to, her thoughts were abruptly cut short by a new voice, calm and authoritative. "Is there a problem here?" The arrival of Kang Su, CEO of Rising Sun Group, shifted the dynamic. He stood beside Suning, his presence a silent but powerful shield. His gaze, sharp and assessing, swept over the scene, taking in the distraught father, the approaching guards, and Suning, her face pale but resolute. The air crackled with unspoken tension. The scent of lilies, moments before so cloying, now seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the subtle, almost imperceptible scent of sandalwood emanating from Kang Su. Suning felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, a small ember in the vast darkness of her fear. Perhaps, she thought, her heart beating a little less frantically, perhaps this isn't the end after all. The opulent chandelier cast a kaleidoscope of light across the polished marble floor, reflecting in the shimmering gowns and sharp suits that populated the hotel lobby. The air thrummed with a low buzz of conversation, punctuated by the clinking of champagne flutes and the polite murmur of greetings. Suning felt the weight of her handbag digging into her shoulder, a tangible reminder of the documents it contained, documents that held the power to shatter the fragile facade of normalcy. She navigated through the crowd, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Each face that swam into her view, every snatch of overheard conversation, seemed to amplify her anxiety. Was this truly the right course of action? The question echoed in the hollow spaces of her mind, a persistent whisper against the backdrop of the orchestrated elegance. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag, the smooth leather a small comfort in the swirling vortex of her thoughts. He was standing near the large window overlooking the city, his back to her, a silhouette against the glittering skyline. Even from a distance, she recognized the sharp lines of his suit, the way he held himself, a quiet authority that radiated outwards. 3 years. 3 years since she had last seen him, since the day her impulsive confession had cost her everything. The memory, sharp and stinging, pricked at the edges of her composure. Had she known then what she knew now, would she have done things differently? The thought was a useless exercise in regret, a bitter pill she swallowed down with a forced breath. Her steps faltered, her carefully constructed resolve threatening to crumble under the weight of his presence. He hadn't moved. He stood there, an immovable object, an embodiment of the life she had lost and the future she was desperately trying to reclaim. "Mr. Liu," she finally managed, her voice a mere tremor in the cavernous space. He turned, and the world seemed to shift on its axis. 3 years had etched faint lines around his eyes, a subtle testament to the passage of time, but his gaze, that piercing, unnerving gaze, remained unchanged. It held the same intensity, the same unnerving ability to see through her carefully constructed defenses. Her breath hitched, a small gasp lost in the symphony of the lobby. He looked tired. The thought surprised her. Lu Qishu, the man who seemed to effortlessly command every room, the man who exuded an aura of invincibility, looked weary. The realization sent a strange pang through her chest, a flicker of something she couldn't quite define. His eyes met hers, and the air crackled with an unspoken tension. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between them, the bustling lobby fading into a muted backdrop. He didn't speak, didn't offer a greeting, simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, taut and heavy, laden with the unspoken words that hung between them. He inclined his head, a gesture that was both a greeting and a dismissal of the surrounding world. "Hi," he finally said, his voice low and even, a stark contrast to the tumult within her. "What a coincidence." His words were laced with a subtle irony that didn't escape her notice. Coincidence? Nothing about this was a coincidence. She had meticulously planned this encounter, orchestrated every detail to ensure this precise moment. Yet, facing him, the carefully constructed facade of her composure began to crumble, leaving her feeling exposed and vulnerable. She began, but the words caught in her throat. What could she possibly say? How could she explain the web of lies and secrets that had led them to this point? "I've been waiting for you for 3 years, he continued, his voice cutting through the silence, each word a precise incision into her carefully constructed defenses. 3 years. The phrase reverberated in her mind, a chilling reminder of the time lost, the opportunities missed, the life she had forfeited. 3 years she had spent rebuilding herself, piece by painstaking piece, only to find herself standing before him, shattered and exposed. A wave of dizziness washed over her, the opulent surroundings blurring at the edges. She gripped her handbag tighter, grounding herself in the tangible reality of its presence. She needed to stay focused, to remember why she was here. "Miss Sue," he said, his voice now laced with steel, "I need a reasonable explanation." His words hung in the air, a demand that echoed the turmoil within her. An explanation. How could she possibly explain the complex tapestry of events that had led to this moment? How could she explain the desperation that had driven her, the fear that had consumed her, the hope that had flickered against all odds? Her mind raced, grappling for a response, a way to navigate the treacherous terrain that lay before her. The weight of his gaze pressed down on her, a tangible force that threatened to suffocate her. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The carefully rehearsed explanations, the justifications she had crafted over the past 3 years, seemed hollow and inadequate in the face of his unwavering scrutiny. He watched her, his expression a mask of controlled impatience. The silence stretched, each second an eternity. The bustling lobby, the clinking glasses, the hushed conversations all faded into a distant hum, leaving only the two of them, locked in a silent battle of wills. The air crackled with unspoken accusations, unanswered questions, and the heavy weight of 3 years of silence. Suning knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that her life was about to irrevocably change. Again. The news spread like wildfire, a controlled burn suddenly raging out of control. A seemingly innocuous press release, timed for maximum impact, detonated across media outlets. Lu Qishu, CEO of the formidable Lu Corporation, had married. Not to the anticipated Song Qinyan, darling of the silver screen and childhood sweetheart, but to Suning. The name was unfamiliar, a whisper against the roar of speculation. Who was this woman? Suning felt the world tilt. Her phone buzzed incessantly, a cacophony of notifications she dared not look at. Just hours ago, she and Qishu had stood before a stoic official, exchanging vows that felt both profoundly real and utterly surreal. The cool metal of the ring against her skin was the only tangible proof of this seismic shift in her life. He married me. The thought reverberated, a dissonant chord of triumph and trepidation. She had confessed her feelings 3 years ago, a reckless act that led to her dismissal. Now, she was Mrs. Lu Qishu. But at what cost? A flicker of doubt, a cold shadow, crossed her heart. Qishu remained an enigma, his expression inscrutable as he fielded calls from agitated board members and bewildered family. His father's voice, laced with barely suppressed fury, crackled through the phone. Qishu's jaw tightened, but his tone remained level, a masterclass in controlled composure. Suning watched him, a knot forming in her stomach. Does he regret this? The question echoed in the hollow spaces of her uncertainty. Across the city, Song Qinyan stared at the newsfeed on her phone, the words blurring into meaningless symbols. A champagne flute, still half full, slipped from her numb fingers, shattering against the polished marble floor. The sound was strangely distant, muffled by the roaring in her ears. Married? To whom? Disbelief warred with a sickening premonition. The image of Qishu, always so reserved, so controlled, smiling faintly at a press conference just days ago, flashed through her mind. He'd said he was dealing with a minor business matter. The carefully neutral tone now resonated with a chilling new meaning. A wave of nausea washed over her, the scent of lilies, his favorite, suddenly cloying, suffocating. The Song family home erupted in a frenzy of accusations and recriminations. Song Qingyan's father paced like a caged tiger, his face contorted with rage. He dared to humiliate us like this. After all we've done for him. Her sister, ever the pragmatist, hissed, we need to contain this. Our shares in Lu Corp, this could ruin everything. The air crackled with panic, the carefully constructed facade of their social standing threatening to crumble. Meanwhile, whispers ricocheted through the gleaming hallways of Lu Corporation. Employees huddled in hushed groups, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. Suning, wasn't she just an assistant? I heard she was fired. Married? The CEO? This is insane. The rumor mill churned, churning out distorted versions of the truth, each more outlandish than the last. Suning found herself trapped in the eye of the storm. Her sister, her voice shrill with a mixture of excitement and concern, bombarded her with questions. Suning. What is going on? Married to Lu Qishu? How? When? Suning could only offer a weak smile, a fragile shield against the onslaught of curiosity. How do I explain something I barely understand myself? Qishu intercepted a call from Song Qinyan, his expression hardening. He listened to her choked accusations, her heartbroken questions, his silence a heavy weight on the line. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and measured. Qinyan, it's complicated. The inadequacy of the words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within them both. He ended the call abruptly, the silence that followed filled with the ghosts of unspoken words and shattered expectations. Later that evening, Suning found herself alone with Qishu in his starkly modern apartment. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken questions. She finally broke the quiet, her voice barely a whisper. Why? Qishu turned to her, his gaze steady. My parents, he said, the words clipped, devoid of emotion. They were pushing for the marriage with Qinyan. This was a solution. The stark admission hung in the air, a cold, hard truth. Suning's carefully constructed composure crumbled. So, it's a fake marriage? The question was a choked whisper, the remnants of hope clinging precariously to her voice. Qishu's expression remained unchanged, but a flicker of something unreadable crossed his eyes. It's not a fake marriage, he corrected, his voice devoid of warmth. We are legally married. But, he paused, the silence amplifying the unspoken. Suning felt a cold dread seep into her bones. She understood. This wasn't a love story. It was a strategic maneuver, a business deal masquerading as a marriage. It turns out that he married me just to deal with his parents. The thought was a sharp, piercing pain, a betrayal that cut deeper than any outright rejection. News of the marriage reached Kong Su, CEO of Rising Sun Group, through the ever-vigilant grapevine of the business world. He leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. Interesting, he murmured, his gaze fixed on a photo of Suning, a forgotten acquaintance from years past, now suddenly thrust into the spotlight. Very interesting indeed. The ripple effects of the announcement continued to spread, each wave carrying new whispers and speculations. At a high society gathering, a prominent investor's wife confided in a friend, you know, Suning, she's the investor's daughter. Old man Li's granddaughter. Quite a coup for Lu Qishu, wouldn't you say? The information, a carefully planted seed, took root and flourished, adding another layer of complexity to the already tangled narrative. The whispers morphed into declarations, fueled by envy and speculation. Mr. Lu got married today. The words, repeated endlessly, became a mantra, a symbol of shifting power dynamics and hidden agendas. The stage was set. The players were in position. The game had begun. And Suning, caught in the crossfire, was about to learn that the price of love, or even a semblance of it, could be devastatingly high. The air in Lu Qishu's office hung thick with the unspoken. Suning stood, a small figure silhouetted against the panoramic city view, the cool glass a stark contrast against the simmering tension in the room. She could feel the weight of her sister, Sun Mei's, gaze, a palpable mix of disbelief and simmering resentment. The words, Mr. Lu has already been taken, echoed in the pristine silence. Suning had meant them as a simple statement of fact, but the tremor in her voice, the almost defiant lift of her chin, betrayed the turbulent emotions churning beneath. 3 years. 3 years since her impulsive confession, her subsequent dismissal, and the gnawing uncertainty that had followed. Now, here she was, Mrs. Lu, a title that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Sun Mei's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. Taken by you. The words were laced with incredulity, edged with a disdain Suning had grown accustomed to over the years. Suning's family, particularly her sister, had always viewed her as a naive dreamer, a romantic fool destined for disappointment. This marriage, to a man as powerful and elusive as Lu Qixu, must have seemed like the ultimate delusion. Yes, by me, Suning replied, her voice steadier this time. She forced herself to meet Sun Mei's gaze directly, refusing to cower. Inside, though, a tremor of doubt snaked through her. Was it truly hers to claim, this position, this man? The secrecy surrounding their marriage, the suddenness of it all, left a persistent unease beneath the veneer of confidence she projected. Qixu, Sun Mei appealed, turning to Lu Qixu, who had remained a silent observer throughout the exchange. His impassive expression, a carefully cultivated mask, gave nothing away. You can't possibly, this must be some sort of misunderstanding. There was a desperation in her voice, a frantic clinging to the belief that this couldn't be happening. The Lu family, the connections, the sheer prestige, it was all slipping away. Lu Qixu finally shifted, his gaze settling on Suning. The subtle change in his demeanor, a barely perceptible softening, did not escape Sun Mei's notice. It was a silent confirmation, more potent than any spoken word. Suning felt a rush of something akin to triumph, a fleeting moment of validation. There is no misunderstanding, Lu Qixu said, his voice a low rumble that filled the room. Suning is my wife. He didn't elaborate, didn't offer any explanation or justification. His words were simple, declarative, final. Sun Mei's face paled, the carefully applied makeup doing little to conceal the shock and anger that flooded her features. The Song family's meticulously crafted plans, the carefully orchestrated meetings, the subtle hints dropped in social circles, all of it rendered useless by a few quiet words. But Qingyan, Sun Mei stammered, invoking the name of her cousin, the acclaimed actress, Lu Qixu's childhood sweetheart. The unspoken question hung heavy in the air. Suning braced herself for the inevitable comparison, the inevitable judgment. Qingyan is a valued friend, Lu Qixu said, his voice devoid of any discernible emotion. This doesn't concern her. The dismissal was swift, clinical, leaving no room for argument. Sun Mei's shoulders slumped, the fight seemingly draining out of her. The carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing a flicker of fear in her eyes. The Song family's ambitions rested on this alliance. What would her father say? What would Qingyan do? Suning watched her sister's retreat, a mixture of pity and satisfaction swirling within her. She understood the desperation, the grasping for something beyond reach. But she also felt a surge of defiance, a refusal to be a pawn in their games. This marriage, however unexpected, was hers. This life, however uncertain, was hers to navigate. Later that day, another confrontation unfolded, this time in the sleek, impersonal environment of Lu Corporation's lobby. Sun Mei, accompanied by her father, cornered Suning as she was leaving. The air crackled with tension, attracting curious glances from passing employees. Suning felt a prickle of unease, a premonition of the storm brewing. Suning, her father began, his voice low and menacing. What have you done? The words were not a question, but an accusation, dripping with disappointment and barely suppressed rage. I married Lu Qixu, Suning replied, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to maintain composure. The words felt strange, foreign, even to her own ears. You deceitful child. Sun Mei hissed, her voice laced with venom. You've trapped him. You've used some underhanded tactic to force him into this. Suning felt a surge of anger, a fiery retort rising in her throat. But she swallowed it down, reminding herself that this was not the time for emotional outbursts. I haven't trapped anyone, she said, her voice steady, though her hands clenched at her sides. Mr. Lu made his choice. Choice? Sun Mei scoffed. He wouldn't choose you. Not over Qin Yan. Not over the Song family. I am now considered the boss lady of Lu Corporation, Suning stated, the words ringing with a newfound authority. The curious stares of the employees intensified, whispers rippling through the lobby. Mr. Lu has already been taken. Stop dreaming. Sun Mei's face contorted with rage. Her father, however, maintained a semblance of control, his eyes narrowed, assessing the situation. He was a man who understood power, who recognized a shift in the balance. Suning, he said, his voice dangerously calm. You may have married Lu Qishu, but that doesn't mean you've won. This arrangement won't last. Suning met his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew the fight was far from over. The Song family wouldn't give up easily. Qin Yan wouldn't back down without a fight. But for now, standing in the heart of Lu Corporation, with the whispers of "boss lady" echoing around her, she felt a flicker of hope, a spark of determination to protect what was hers. The road ahead would be treacherous, filled with uncertainties and challenges, but she was no longer the naive girl who had confessed her love 3 years ago. She was Mrs. Lu, and she would fight for her place, for her marriage, for her future. The crisp Kyoto air, scented with the subtle perfume of cherry blossoms even in the fading light, did little to soothe the knot in Suning's stomach. The opulent hotel room, with its panoramic view of the city lights twinkling like a scattered handful of diamonds, felt more like a gilded cage. He was leaving again. Just days after their clandestine marriage, a hastily whispered ceremony in a stark, impersonal office, Lu Qishu was packing a suitcase, his movements precise and economical, his expression unreadable. She watched him, a strange mix of resentment and longing twisting within her. 3 years. 3 years she had carried the torch of her confessed love, a love that had cost her her job at his company, a love that had simmered beneath the surface, only to be reignited in this strange, almost surreal union. Had she truly secured him, or was this just another illusion, a fleeting mirage in the desert of her longing? He zipped the suitcase shut, the click echoing in the sudden quiet. Turning, his gaze met hers. His eyes, the color of dark, aged whiskey, held a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher. Was it guilt? Annoyance? Or simply the detached indifference he so often projected? I'm going to Kyoto on a business trip for a week, he stated, his voice level, devoid of any inflection that might betray his true thoughts. A week. 7 days. 168 hours. The numbers echoed in her mind, each one a small, sharp stab of loneliness. She forced a smile, a brittle, fragile thing. Business, of course, she echoed, her voice betraying none of the turmoil within. She had learned to mask her emotions well, a survival tactic honed over years of navigating the treacherous waters of her family's ambition. He paused, his gaze lingering on her face for a moment longer than necessary. I have no plans to separate for the time being, he added, the words hanging in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Suning's heart gave a small, unsteady flutter. Was it reassurance? Or a veiled threat? She couldn't tell. The Song family, her family, would be clamoring for a public announcement, a grand celebration befitting the union of their daughter and the CEO of Lu Corporation. They wouldn't understand, couldn't comprehend, this strange, secretive dance they were engaged in. Her sister, with her sharp tongue and even sharper ambition, would be whispering poison in her father's ear, fueling his already simmering impatience. Of course not, she replied, her voice smooth, controlled. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her uncertainty, her fear. He nodded, a curt, almost dismissive gesture, and turned to pick up his briefcase. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Suning's mind raced, replaying the events of the past few days, searching for clues, for answers. The hurried wedding, the lack of any real celebration, his almost immediate departure. Was she a fool to believe this was anything more than a convenient arrangement for him? A way to appease his parents, to silence the incessant matchmaking attempts of his social circle? Going on a business trip right after getting married, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, the words laced with a subtle accusation she couldn't quite suppress. He stopped at the door, his hand on the handle, and turned back to face her. The light from the hallway illuminated half his face, casting the other half in shadow, emphasizing the sharp angles of his cheekbones, the hard line of his jaw. The image, so stark, so contrasting, mirrored the complexities of their relationship. "It's not a fake marriage, Suning," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. The words, so blunt, so direct, struck her with unexpected force. She stared at him, her breath catching in her throat. He hadn't denied the implication that it wasn't a love match either. He hadn't offered any tenderness, any reassurance beyond the cold, hard fact of their legal bond. He held her gaze for a long moment, then turned and left, the soft click of the door closing behind him echoing the hollow ache in her chest. She stood there, frozen, the silence of the opulent room pressing in on her, amplifying the turmoil within. Suning walked to the window, the city lights blurring through the film of unshed tears in her eyes. Kyoto, a city steeped in history, in tradition, in the weight of unspoken promises. Was her own promise, the silent vow she had made to herself to secure Lu Chishu's love, destined to be buried beneath the weight of their secrets, their unspoken truths? The image of Kong Su, the CEO of Rising Sun Group, flashed across her mind. His calm demeanor, his perceptive gaze, the subtle concern he had shown her during their brief encounter at the business summit. He was a complication she hadn't anticipated, a flicker of warmth in the cold landscape of her calculated marriage. He represented a path not taken, a life she might have had, a life free from the machinations of the Song family, from the enigmatic complexities of Lu Chishu. She closed her eyes, drawing a deep, shaky breath. The scent of cherry blossoms, so delicate, so fleeting, filled her senses, a bittersweet reminder of the fragility of hope, the ephemeral nature of happiness. She had secured the marriage, the legal bond, but the true battle, the fight for his heart, had just begun. And she wasn't sure she was ready for the war that lay ahead. The opulent drapes of the Song family mansion felt suffocating. Suning sat stiffly on the plush sofa, the silence broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock, each tick a hammer blow against her fragile composure. Her father paced, a caged tiger, his anger radiating in waves. "Do you understand the severity of this, Suning?" he finally erupted, his voice a low growl. He doesn't understand, she thought, a bitter taste rising in her throat. He sees only the lost opportunity, not the cage I've escaped. He spoke again, his voice edged with desperation. "Dad transferred you to that school, do you remember? He orchestrated every encounter, every chance meeting." Suning's mind flashed back to seemingly innocent encounters, orchestrated smiles, and casual introductions. A creeping unease settled in her stomach. It was all a carefully constructed play, and she had been a naive pawn. He was building a bridge, Suning, a bridge to the Lu family. The words hung heavy in the air, thick with unspoken accusations. Suning stared at a stray thread on the pristine carpet, a small imperfection in a world of meticulously crafted appearances. Her sister, Mei Lin, sat across from her, a mask of detached amusement on her face. Suning could practically hear the gears turning in Mei Lin's head, calculating the damage, the potential for gain amidst the chaos. She's always been like this, Suning thought wearily, a scavenger circling the wounded. Her father continued his tirade, each word a lash. "We were so close, Suning. So close to securing your future, our family's future." He slammed his fist on a nearby table, making her jump. Suning closed her eyes briefly, trying to block out the noise, the accusations, the weight of their expectations. She had tasted freedom, a fleeting moment of agency, and now they were trying to drag her back into the gilded cage. Across the city, in a sleek, modern apartment, Song Qinyan stared at her reflection, the face of a renowned actress, flawless and composed. But behind the carefully applied makeup, cracks were beginning to appear. The news had broken like a tidal wave, sweeping away the carefully constructed illusion of her relationship with Lu Qishu. The whispers, the speculative glances, the thinly veiled pity, it was all suffocating. He wouldn't, she thought, clinging to a shred of disbelief. He couldn't do this to me. Her phone buzzed incessantly, a chorus of concerned messages, curious inquiries, and veiled gloating. She ignored them all, her mind racing, replaying every interaction with Lu Qishu, searching for a clue, a sign, anything that would explain the betrayal. Her mother entered, her face etched with worry and barely concealed fury. "Qin Yan, darling, this is a disaster," she whispered, her voice tight with barely suppressed panic. Song Qingyan's father followed close behind, his face grim. "They're saying it's been going on for years," he said, his voice heavy with disbelief. "A secret marriage, how could he?" The room felt smaller, the air thick with tension. Song Qinyan could feel the walls closing in, the weight of her family's expectations pressing down on her. "It's not just my heartbreak," she realized with a chilling clarity, "it's their ruined plans, their shattered ambitions. We need to control the narrative," her mother declared, her voice regaining its usual steeliness. "We need to minimize the damage." Flashing lights momentarily blinded Song Qinyan. The incessant clicking of cameras, the barrage of questions, it was a whirlwind of chaos. "Miss Song, is it true? When did you find out about the marriage? Miss Song, how do you feel about Mr. Lu's betrayal? Miss Song, what will you do now?" The questions were relentless, each one a jab, twisting the knife deeper into the wound. "They're like vultures," she thought, "feeding on my pain." She forced a smile, a practiced expression of composure, and offered a carefully crafted statement, a delicate dance between denial and acceptance, designed to protect her image, her career, her family's reputation. Back in the stifling confines of the Song family mansion, the conversation took a darker turn. "Dad is going to marry you off to the countryside soon," Maylin said casually, her voice dripping with a strange mix of pity and satisfaction. Suning stared at her sister, her mind struggling to process the information. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes," her father confirmed, his voice devoid of emotion. "The surname is Kong. Grandpa arranged a marriage for the Song and Kong families a long time ago. It was a backup plan, a safety net." And now, his voice trailed off, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. A safety net, Suning thought bitterly, a cage by another name. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. They had never seen her as a person, only as a pawn in their elaborate game of social climbing and financial security. The news spread like wildfire. Whispers in corporate boardrooms, gossip columns in entertainment magazines, trending topics on social media. The secret marriage of Lu Qishu and Suning became the talk of the town. In a quiet corner of a bustling city, Kong Su, the CEO of Rising Sun Group, watched the drama unfold with a detached amusement. He had known Suning since childhood, a silent observer of her struggles, her resilience, her quiet strength. He knew the Song family's machinations, their relentless pursuit of power and wealth. And now, he saw an opportunity, a chance to rewrite the script, to offer Suning a different path, a different kind of freedom. He took a sip of his coffee, a faint smile playing on his lips. The game is afoot, he thought, and the pieces are moving. The delicate porcelain teacup trembled in Suning's hand. Steam curled upwards, blurring the intricate cherry blossom design painted on its surface, much like the anxieties swirling within her. The Kyoto restaurant, renowned for its serene atmosphere, felt suffocating. Each meticulously arranged ikebana, each whispered conversation, grated on her nerves. She hadn't touched the exquisitely prepared sushi on her plate. The vibrant colors, the glistening fish, held no appeal. Her appetite had vanished the moment she saw Song Qinyan stride through the entrance. Suning had known this confrontation was inevitable. Like a dark cloud looming on the horizon, she had felt its approach. But nothing could have truly prepared her for the cold fury radiating from the actress. Song Qinyan's elegant posture, normally radiating effortless grace, was now rigid, her every movement precise, controlled. The gentle smile that usually graced her lips was replaced by a thin, hard line. Her eyes, however, were the most striking change. The warmth had vanished, replaced by a chilling, glacial stare. "May I join you?" Song Qinyan's voice was deceptively calm, each syllable perfectly enunciated. Suning swallowed, the lump in her throat making it difficult. "Qinyan," she began, but the words faltered. What could she possibly say? An apology seemed inadequate, a denial even more so. The truth, the raw, exposed truth of her secret marriage to Lu Qishu, was a barbed weapon she was reluctant to wield. "Why didn't you notify me?" Song Qinyan's voice was still controlled, but a tremor of something dangerous, anger, hurt, disbelief vibrated beneath the surface. Her gaze, sharp and unwavering, pierced through Suning, stripping away any pretense of composure. Suning's mind raced. She could see the confusion battling with anger in Song Qinyan's eyes. The carefully constructed world the actress had built around her relationship with Lu Qishu was crumbling, and Suning was the architect of its destruction. A wave of guilt washed over her. She had never intended to hurt Song Qinyan, but she had also never intended to relinquish her claim on Lu Qishu. This precarious balancing act was now collapsing. It was sudden, Suning stammered, her voice barely a whisper against the soft hum of the restaurant. Internally, she cursed her own weakness. This wasn't the bold, assertive woman who had confessed her love to Lu Qishu 3 years ago. This was a woman trapped in a web of deceit, desperately trying to hold on to a fragile thread of hope. A brittle laugh escaped Song Qinyan's lips. The sound was devoid of humor, sharp and cutting. "Sudden. A marriage is sudden. To Lu Qishu. I find that difficult to believe." Her eyes narrowed, scrutinizing Suning's face, searching for a crack in her facade. "Unless, of course," she paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. "Unless it's not real." Suning's heart hammered against her ribs. Denial was on the tip of her tongue, a desperate attempt to maintain the illusion, but the words wouldn't come. The weight of the lie pressed down on her, suffocating her. "I know it's fake," Song Qinyan continued, her voice laced with a chilling certainty. A flicker of something akin to pity crossed her face. It was a fleeting expression, quickly replaced by the cold mask of composure. Some sort of business arrangement, perhaps. A way to appease investors. "I understand these things happen." A bitter taste rose in Suning's mouth. To be reduced to a pawn in a corporate game, a convenient prop in Lu Qishu's world, it was a humiliation she hadn't anticipated. And yet, she couldn't deny the seed of truth in Song Qinyan's words. Her marriage to Lu Qishu was far from conventional. It was shrouded in secrecy, built on a foundation of unspoken agreements and hidden motivations. But Song Qinyan leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, the object can't be you." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. The disdain in her voice was a physical blow. Suning flinched. The carefully constructed wall she had erected around her emotions began to crumble. The casual dismissal, the utter disbelief that she, Suning, could be the woman Lu Chishu chose, struck a deep chord of insecurity. It echoed the whispers of doubt that had plagued her since the moment she said, "I do." Was she truly worthy of him? Was their marriage nothing more than a fleeting whim, a temporary arrangement that would dissolve as quickly as it had begun? She opened her mouth to speak, to defend herself, to assert her claim, but the words caught in her throat. The weight of Song Qingyan's disbelief, the sheer force of her conviction, was overwhelming. In that moment, Suning felt utterly exposed, stripped bare of all pretense. The carefully constructed facade she had maintained for so long shattered, leaving her raw and vulnerable. The quiet hum of the restaurant seemed to amplify the silence between them, a silence pregnant with unspoken accusations, with the crushing weight of a truth yet to be fully revealed. The delicate cherry blossoms on her teacup blurred further, lost in the rising tide of her uncertainty. The serene Kyoto restaurant, a haven of tranquility just moments ago, now felt like a battleground, and she, the unwilling combatant, was already losing the war. The hushed whispers followed Suning like a second skin. They pricked, they itched, they burned. Each glance, whether veiled or outright, carried the weight of the revelation. Lu Chishu, the untouchable CEO, was married. And to her. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, each fantasy a kaleidoscope of shared smiles and public declarations. The reality, however, was a cold, fractured mirror reflecting back a distorted image of her hopes. She'd known it would be difficult, but the sheer venom in some of those whispers, the undisguised contempt in the eyes of Lu Chishu's female employees, it was a baptism by fire she hadn't anticipated. Her phone vibrated incessantly, a relentless chorus of notifications. She knew without looking, it would be her sister, her mother, the whole Song family machinery whirring into overdrive. Their carefully constructed plans, their intricate web of social climbing, threatened to unravel because of her. She could almost hear her father's booming voice, laced with disappointment and barely suppressed rage. The irony was a bitter pill. They'd wanted her out of the picture, away from Lu Chishu, and now, their worst nightmare was their own making. Suning clutched her bag tighter, its smooth leather a small comfort against the churning in her stomach. Lu Chishu had promised to handle it, to smooth the waters. His words, clipped and precise, echoed in her mind, a stark contrast to the warmth she'd craved. Give it time, Suning. This will pass. Time. A luxury she wasn't sure she had. The whispers were already solidifying into rumors, the rumors morphing into accusations. She was a gold digger, a manipulator, a nobody who'd somehow ensnared the city's most eligible bachelor. She needed an escape, a sanctuary from the suffocating scrutiny. Work. It was the only thing that could anchor her, give her a sense of purpose beyond the swirling vortex of the Lu family drama. The interview at Rising Sun Group was her lifeline. She'd prepared meticulously, pouring all her anxieties and frustrations into researching the company, crafting the perfect responses. This wasn't just a job, it was a declaration of independence, a way to prove her worth beyond her marital status. The sleek, modern lobby of Rising Sun hummed with quiet efficiency. It was a world away from the opulent, almost suffocating grandeur of Lu Chishu's corporation. Here, the air felt lighter, charged with a different kind of energy. Suning took a deep breath, trying to quell the tremor in her hands. This was her chance. She couldn't afford to let the weight of her secret marriage crush her. The interview panel consisted of 3 individuals, their faces impassive, their gazes sharp and assessing. Suning answered their questions with a practiced calm, her voice steady, her words precise. She could feel their scrutiny, a silent dissection of her skills, her experience, her very essence. Each question was a hurdle, and she cleared them one by one, drawing on her knowledge, her passion, her sheer determination. "Miss Su, congratulations on passing the first round of screening," the woman in the center announced, her tone neutral, devoid of any warmth. However, there seems to be a discrepancy in your application. Your major is in media and communications, yet this position requires a background in finance. Suning's heart plummeted. She'd known this was a risk, applying for a role outside her direct field. But she'd been desperate, driven by the need to escape the suffocating shadow of the Liu family. Yes, Suning admitted, her voice barely a whisper, a knot tightening in her throat. Because my major is media and communications, I bring a unique perspective to the table. My understanding of narrative and communication strategies can be invaluable in crafting compelling financial reports and investor presentations. I've also taken several online courses in finance and economics, and I'm a quick learner, eager to expand my skill set. She held her breath, her gaze fixed on the panel, searching for a flicker of understanding, a hint of acceptance. The silence stretched, each second an eternity. Then, a deep, resonant voice cut through the tension. "Miss Su, I find your explanation intriguing." The man who spoke sat slightly apart from the other two, his presence commanding, his eyes holding an unsettling depth. He'd been silent throughout the interview, his expression unreadable. Now, his gaze seemed to pierce through her carefully constructed facade, seeing something beyond the resume, beyond the rehearsed answers. It was Kang Su, the CEO of Rising Sun Group, a name whispered with reverence in business circles. A man she'd only read about in magazines, a figure shrouded in an aura of mystery and power. Her mind raced, grappling with the implications. What did he see? What did he know? A wave of dizziness washed over her, a sudden, inexplicable sense of disorientation. It was more than just the pressure of the interview, more than the exhaustion of the past few days. It was a premonition, a whisper of something larger, something she couldn't quite grasp. He continued, his voice smooth, almost hypnotic. Your unconventional background could indeed be an asset. Tell me, Miss Su, what is your understanding of risk? Suning's mind scrambled, her thoughts a tangled mess. Risk. It was a word that resonated deeply, echoing the precarious tightrope she was walking. The risk of exposure, the risk of losing everything, the risk of falling into the abyss of the Liu family's machinations. Risk, she began, her voice gaining strength, a flicker of defiance igniting in her eyes, is not something to be feared, but something to be calculated. It's about understanding the potential consequences and having the courage to act, even when the outcome is uncertain. It's about betting on yourself. Kang Su's lips curved into a faint smile, a fleeting expression that sent a shiver down her spine. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. Well said, Miss Su. Very well said.